Hey there, creepy peeps, and welcome to another creepy book club. Today we are talking about our October book, Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. Really quick before we get into that though, I want to say thank you to my creepy patron peeps for your support of my channel. Thank you guys so much. If you want to find out the perks to being a creepy patron peep, you can follow that link in the description. Also, happy Halloween, guys. This is one of 3 videos I'm posting today. I just figured I'd save them all for Halloween because, you know, it's trick or treat, you know? So I'm just treating you guys. Something you guys didn't ask for, probably. Published in 1962, Something Wicked This Way Comes follows 13-year-old best friends Jim Nightshade and Will Holloway one October when a mysterious carnival run by a malevolent being, Mr. Dark, comes into town. Jim is drawn to the carnival, particularly the carousel that seemingly makes one younger or older depending on the direction you ride it in. So my creepy book club members and I decided on Something Wicked This Way Comes for October. I've said it a couple times, Ray Bradbury is one of my favorite authors. I feel like he captures the essence of autumn and October so well, and I was really happy this one got chosen because I really wanted to read this one this month. I loved it. I loved the themes of this book. They really spoke to me. One of the biggest themes of the book is getting older, death, kind of accepting that. So we see that in a bunch of characters in the book. Obviously, like I said in the summary, Jim really wants to be older. So he's drawn to the carousel because he wants to jump forward in time a little bit, maybe to his 20s, that sort of thing. But then we have Will's father, Charles, who longs to be younger. The recurring theme throughout the book that the music that the carousel plays is the funeral march when it's going forward. So when it's going forward, it's playing the funeral march and you get older as you turn. But the recurring theme is, at least for a lot of the adults in town, is to become younger again. So a lot of people ride the carousel backwards, in which they get younger and the carousel plays the funeral march backwards, which is something that kind of haunts Will throughout the book. There's gonna be a clip in a second of the funeral march playing backwards because it is kind of, I don't know, it's weird, just listen. It was one of those things, like, I'm so glad there are other people that have read this book out there that have posted that to YouTube, because as soon as I read it 2 or 3 times, I was like, okay, I can't, it's hard to imagine in your head that playing backwards, so it's like I had to go listen to it. But obviously I related to this on a personal level, which I'm sure a lot of other people do as well. I've had episodes of wanting to be older, and you know, there's kind of this notion that everything, if your life is difficult where you are in the present, there's kind of this notion that's in the back of our heads we know is incorrect or is not necessarily correct, but it's you feel like if you jump forward in time, everything will be better. And because you'll be an adult and you won't be as helpless as a kid, you know what I mean? So I feel like that's kind of what Jim is going through in the book. He wants to jump forward in time and kind of just get out of the town and everything will be better because he's older. And then we have Charles, who at the beginning of the book doesn't relate to his son very well, but you can hear, you know, you learn from his inner dialogue that he longs to be younger, and in his mind he still feels like he could run and go on adventures and things like that like Will and Jim do, but physically he can't. He feels like he's very old. He's only, I think he's like 54 in the book, so he's middle-aged. Which isn't old by any means, but you know, as he's like looking at his 13-year-old son, he feels old. So, you know, I can relate to that, as I'm sure some of you can as well, like wanting to go back in time and do things over and have everything be fresh and new and have like your whole life ahead of you again. You know, like everyone kind of has those moments. This theme is also driven home by the constant imagery of the seasons, which are often used as a metaphor for your age in life. So spring being the beginning of your life at your youngest, then summer, which is kind of where Jim and Will are, like still young but not too old yet, you know what I mean? And then autumn being more where Charles is in life, and then winter obviously being an elder, being near the end of your life. So of course that's a big theme in the movie, as this takes place in October, so we're kind of like on that cusp in the book of fall and winter. So you know, there's this whole idea of like, you know, like the days are shorter, the nights are longer, everything just feels like it's dying, the leaves falling off of the trees, and it's all very much about death that is coming for you. And then you have like the funeral march playing from the carousel, and it's just you know, all of this imagery like just reminding you that death is something that always happens. Like it happens to everybody except for Mr. Dark. There's also a mirror maze at the carnival, which horrifies a lot of the guests, and I feel like it kind of aids in getting them to sell their soul by going on the carousel, which I'll get to in a second. But there's a lot of instances of people going into the mirror maze, and what they see reflected back is them, but at the end of their life, very old, very decrepit, and you know, gross almost. Like, and I'm not saying, you know, you're gross if you're old, it's kind of just like the imagery that's in the book, and that horrifies a lot of people, and I feel like that's kind of like a selling point to get people on the carousel. So basically this whole thing that Charles kind of comes to this conclusion about the carousel is that the carousel only ages, or de-ages, I guess, your body, your physical form. So you get younger physically or you get older physically, but mentally you stay the same. So it's like either way you go, you know, he explains this to Jim and Will, like, because Jim wants to be older, like he could make himself older, but he's still gonna have the mind of a 13-year-old boy, and that would be noticeable. Same thing if Charles went back in time, he, you know, if he went back to when he was 13, he would still have the mind of a 54-year-old, like with all of his experiences. So like in that way, it's like you can become younger and live longer, but then you're alienating yourself from your peers, and then the only place you can turn is the carnival, which is kind of like how, so Mr. Dark is kind of this like I said, malevolent being. He's this eternal being, like obviously he's lived for a very long time because of the carousel, and same thing with all the other freaks of the carnival. They're kind of enslaved almost a little bit, but it's just like there's nowhere else to turn. And so that's kind of like the thing that they realize about the carousel, is that, you know, you can get what you want, but it's like the only place that you're really going to be able to turn is the carnival, and you're going to be forever trapped there, essentially. That's what I mean by like kind of like selling your soul, and that's kind of like what Mr. Dark is getting people to do. He's trying to, you know, get people to to do this. And speaking of Mr. Dark kind of helps embody fear, and then obviously we have the natural fear of death, getting older. And this novel does tackle that a lot. It kind of reminded me of A Nightmare on Elm Street a little bit, but basically Charles realizes a theme that's recurring in a lot of other books and movies, and like I mentioned, A Nightmare on Elm Street is a big one that I think you guys will all it's a very recognizable theme, where Nancy realizes the only power that Freddy has over her is her fear of him. So if she, you know, how she says she gives it back, like she's, you know, she lets go of that fear and it defeats Freddy. Charles kind of goes through the same thing. Like he realizes the only power that objects or people have over you is your perception of them. So if you're afraid of something, then they have a power over you. But as soon as you release that fear, they no longer have any power over you. Charles realizes through this epiphany that laughter and joy is a weapon against like the other freaks of the carnival. Like there's a witch and like all these other characters, but that's how he defeats them, is through laughter and through joy. I kind of understood this as especially relating to Charles a little bit, like thinking about Charles's character. At the beginning of the book, like I said, he doesn't connect to his son very well, and he spends all of his time in the library where he works and just longing to be younger again. And so like all this time, you know, it's like that very famous quote, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. I kind of took that in context with the book. Like his life is passing him by while he's just sat there wishing to be younger again, when you can, and this is going to get very sappy and I know, just bear with me, when you can enjoy the life you have, your friends, your family, you can enjoy everything right now. And in that sense, you kind of defeat death. Not defeat death, but you defeat the fear of death. So you're taking away the power that fear, you know, you're taking away the power that death has over you. So it's like you're no longer afraid of dying and just living your entire life in this perpetual fear of this, and then eventually dying and your whole life being miserable. And you can enjoy life and then just, I'm gonna steal the quote from Harry Potter, greet death as an old friend at the end. So like I said, we see this with Charles at the beginning longing to be younger, and then at the end of the novel when Will and Jim, you know, they still have a little bit of, you know, their childlike behavior in them. They, you know, they run off away from the carnival and Charles runs after them and he's able to keep up, and they, you know, it's, I think he says it in the book. Hold on, I'm gonna read the quote because it's really good. They're running away from the carnival, but they kind of make it a game. Like obviously, I think it's like Jim or something says, last one to the railroad crossing is an old lady. So they start running. And behind them jogged a middle-aged man with his own now solemn, now amiable thoughts. Perhaps the boys slowed, they never knew. Perhaps Charles Holloway quickened his pace, he could not say. But running, even with the boys, the middle-aged man reached out. Will slapped, Jim slapped, Dad slapped the semaphore signal base at the same instant. Exultant, they banged a trio of shouts down the wind. Then, as the moon watched, the three of them together left the wilderness behind and walked into the town. Kind of like a compromise happens between the characters. Like it says, like, you know, as they're all running, Charles doesn't know whether he was going faster or the boys slowed down, or it was a combination of the three. Like the boys kind of grew up, but in a sense also learned to enjoy, again, like I said, enjoy their life that they're living right now, not longing to be older and, you know, just wasting away your childhood wishing to be older. And Charles meets them halfway by not longing to be younger anymore, and just they are enjoying the present. They meet at the present, if that makes sense. I'm getting really sappy, I know. So of course, speaking of Jim and Will, there is like a coming of age bit with it. So over the course of the novel, they learn to face their fears and overcome temptation, which is mostly with Jim and the carousel. And this is kind of physically shown towards the end when Jim, after everything, even though he's terrified of Mr. Dark and everything, he gets on the carousel. And Will, trying to stop him, gets pulled onto the carousel as well, and they each take a turn. I think they age like a year or something like that. And it never actually says whether they get on and reverse it before they destroy the carousel. So it's kind of like emotionally, they've grown up a little bit, but also like, which is kind of just represented by them physically like adding on a year to their age. But they still like, they're still only like 14 years old. So they're still kind of young, still in that summer era, but they're no longer longing to be 20 years old. So, sorry, that all probably sounded like an essay for like AP Lit or something like that. I'm sorry. I like to read, you guys. I'm very nerdy in that way. I know I talk about movies a lot, but I'm a nerdy nerd when it comes to the books. So personally, I loved this book. I've always been a fan of Ray Bradbury's Imagery. I've said this a million times, especially when it comes to the seasons. The man really knows how to transport you, I gotta say. We don't get a proper fall here in Florida, but I feel like we do when I'm reading Ray Bradbury. He kind of being in between the ages of Charles and Jim and Will. I mean, obviously a little bit closer to Jim and Will. I feel like, at least for me, it was like kind of like the perfect age to read this in, because I could relate to both characters a little bit, because I'm kind of in between. Yeah, and like I said, I'm really happy that this one won the vote to read for October, because I really wanted to read it, and it's now one of my favorites of his. So I'm gonna give this a 5 out of 5. Unfortunately, all the other members of the book club, at least at the time of me recording this, nobody really had time to read it, which I understand. October is a busy time for everybody. So I guess it'll just be my rating on Goodreads until, you know, I don't have a average rating from all the group members, but on Goodreads as a whole, it has a 4 out of 5, and also on Barnes & Noble and Amazon, it also has 4 out of 5. If you've read Something Wicked, This Way Comes, please let me know in the comment section down below what you thought about it. As always, I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you're interested and you want to join the Creepy Book Club, our November book is going to be The Hunger by Alma Katsu. Let's read this one sentence here to kind of summarize what I imagine the book's going to be about. Obviously, I haven't read it yet, but it's a tense and gripping reimagining of one of America's most haunting human disasters, the Donner Party, with a supernatural turn. Again, I'm glad this one got voted for November, because I feel like it's very appropriate given like Thanksgiving. The Hunger. So if you want to join us for that, you can check that out. If maybe you can't join for November, but you want to jump on when we start our book in December, if you head over to my blog, which is linked in the description, and go to the Creepy Book Club page, I have all of the, like, because we had decided we had decided all of our books for the end of the year a couple months ago. So I have all the books that we're reading for the rest of the year down there, so you can find our December book. And if you go to the group page on Goodreads, you can also see what our December book is there as well, if you want to grab that and get a jump on that. Right, I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new here and become a Creepy Peep today. I post videos Monday through Friday, and you can ring a notification bell down there to be notified every time I post a video or go live, even though it doesn't always work. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, stay strange. Bye!